I do appreciate all the different varieties of ways that God has made us salt and light.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing for the kingdom of God, to recognize that we're not dysfunctional because we're different. No, but I poked the bear just a little bit in Christianity, where by all worldly metrics, I am not successful. But I hope I offend the right kind of people that are out there who are not thinking critically about the fact that we need to understand what people's limitations are. I'm not going to Jelly Roll and asking him to be R.C. Sproul.
Yes.
I'm not asking him to be a theologian.
Yeah.
Most people don't have a brain. That's your tease. You better hang on in this interview, and you're going to get to some incredible stuff related to...
Welcome to Salty Christians. I'm here with my buddy Erskin. So we met 2 years ago at a conference.
We did.
And
time flies.
Man. Well, and then it was more than 2 years ago at a podcasting conference.
Was it 2 years ago? I feel like it was 2 years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago.
Well, all that to be said, we had this amazing conversation. The stories you were sharing, and we were talking about faith and everything.
Yeah.
We connected a couple weeks ago, and I was like, hey, I've started this YouTube channel called Salty Christians, and the goal of it is, it's based off of Matthew 5:13. You're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. Mm-hmm. And I know whenever I hear a believer share, when God used them, I'm inspired to be, how do I be more salt and light?
Sure.
Actually, in my last episode, I interviewed my pastor and just kind of asking him for advice of how do I go about asking questions? Because some people don't want to brag. They don't, and there's like that balance of like bragging on God or bragging on yourself. And just the bit I know about you, you're not this braggadocious, but you're letting God use you and work through you.
Well, praise the Lord. Many people say that. I feel like in my heart, I still have a long distance to go in terms of humility and just pursuing the Lord with a degree of just patience. I think patience and humility, those kind of things go hand to hand together. And so that's an honor that you would say that, and probably to God be the glory if that's what you're seeing in my life.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole point of this podcast, is for God to get glory, but through every individual. So it's not just Erskin, the musician, the touring guy, this or that. Like, it's whoever's watching this video to be inspired by the words that you say to go be salt and light.
Come on in, the water's fine.
Exactly. And so I guess I want to start with, because I know we just reconnected a couple weeks ago, and you were sharing some stuff about a grant that you got from Walmart. And we can go into that. But first, the thing that I just remember from our conversation over 2 years ago over a burrito bowl was you just sharing how you felt so called to your neighborhood. And I guess I'll just let you take it from there, because I was just like encouraged by that to go, man, do I even know my neighbors?
Well, I will say this. After 4 years of church planting, we started with 4. And after 4 years of church planting, I can now tell people out there that we have 3 people. So church planting is not for the faint of heart, but it is a work unto the Lord. And I'm so glad maybe that we started there, because a lot of times, you do a lot of interviews. I do a lot of interviews. I have the Erskin Music Show. If you haven't already liked and subscribed that, you can do that.
We'll link it below.
Yeah, link it below. But so I interview a lot of different people, and one of the things that happens is you always go to the highlights. What's the tip of the spear? What do they do? This person is a music artist, and so we're here in Nashville, Tennessee, with a music artist, and he's doing all these different things, traveling around the world. But I love the fact that we started in a place where, by all worldly metrics, I am not successful. But I think, to your point, instead of looking at worldly metrics to be successful, let's be faithful. Let's be faithful to the Lord. And that is a work unto the Lord, in which I've said, Lord, I am thankful for the fact that you blessed me and my wife to both have master's degrees from seminary. I'm thankful to the Lord that you've allowed us, in many cases, the privilege of being able to travel overseas and do ministry in various contexts. My wife for several years, and myself in 6 or 7 different countries. Very thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the church that we were at in Franklin. Wonderful church, godly people, faithful ministry. But if I'm not touching these people that are around where I live at, I feel like a little bit of a hypocrite. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite because I have this nice church experience. I have these wonderful conversations. I talk about supralapsarianism, infralapsarianism when I'm at church, and then these people are going to die and they're going to go to hell. And so if you can sleep well with yourself at night, then that's between you and the Lord. But I was just at a place where I was just burdened for these people. Because, and here's the thing, Matt, I tell people all the time, especially when I'm in Texas, back in the great nation of Texas.
The nation of Texas,
The
yes.
great nation of Texas. I've got a lot of friends that are conservative. If you know anything about Texas, most of Texas, except for Austin and Houston and a couple of other pockets, is really conservative, supremely conservative. So when I tell my friends in Texas and my conservative friends, I have friends in Nashville who are, one, kinder than most Christians that I know. Two, they're smarter and more politically savvy than most Christians that I know. It kind of breaks down this wall of the reason why they're liberal and progressive is because they're dumb. Well, that certainly is not the case.
Yeah.
The reason why they're liberal and progressive is because they're unkind and they don't care about humanity. I just can't say that about my neighbors. You might be able to say that about your neighbors, but I can't say that about my neighbors. Some of the most generous people that I know, they have been with us for years. And so why should I glory and make great the name of Jesus across the nation and across, the world, and not do that in my own city, in my own neighborhood, on my own block with my own neighbors? And so it just comes down to that.
Yeah. So for the person who's feeling a little conviction right now, the good conviction of like, yeah, maybe I need to go talk to my neighbor. Well, what's some advice or encouragement you can give to them who are like, they haven't maybe talked to their neighbor since they moved into their home?
Yeah.
What's the start? And I guess I will recognize that it looks different for everyone.
Sure.
Like, this is not a one size fits all. This is how you go minister and be salt and light to your neighbor. But like, just, maybe some words of wisdom you have for that.
Well, I know somebody out there, if the cynic is out there, is going to say, well, somebody that started with 4 people 4 years ago and has 3 people now is probably not the guy that's the authority on how to reach your neighbors for the gospel. But I will just simply say this, if you're uncomfortable with being different, then get comfortable with being different. I remember several of our neighbors, when they moved into our neighborhood, we would take cookies to them. I don't know that I necessarily want to eat somebody's cookies that I don't know.
Yeah.
What ingredients do they put in them? East Nashville is a super health conscious kind of place. Do they use too much sugar? What do they, throw these cookies away. But it was a gesture, at least. It was something that identified us. It marked us out. We put out signs when we're worshiping on Sunday. And so we're different. And so I would just tell people, one of the first things is you're going to be different if you're a follower of Jesus. You're just going to be. The way that you live, the priorities that you have. Our kids were homeschooled, and so certain times throughout the day they're home, they're doing different things. We have people that come over our house. Don't try to act like you don't watch your neighbors. Your neighbors watch you as well. They see who's coming into your house.
They know you're homeschooling. You're that weird homeschooling family.
You're that weird homeschooling. They know what kind of cars are driving into your driveway, what kind of people are getting out of those cars. They pay attention to those kind of things, and so do we. And so just don't be afraid to be different and live the Christian life in front of people, and don't be ashamed and afraid to let it be known that you're a follower of Christ. We do certain things during Christmas. We did one year for the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you. We made some Star Wars cookies and took those to our neighbors. Yeah. And so we just try to do all manner of silly things and some serious things, sacred things, just to let our neighbors know that we're there. And we care.
You're not forcing your faith on them. You're just being a good neighbor.
We're being a good neighbor until it's time for us to force our faith.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a degree of discernment of when to drop the hint, and then to when to be more, or just to be there. Right. I mean, I'm a firm believer that as Christians, one of the best times that we can be salt and light and witness to someone is when they're going through a trial or a tragedy.
Absolutely.
Because we have the answer, and they're in their deepest time of grieving. We can come there, not with our ulterior motive of we're going to get you saved, so I can add another check mark to my list. It's like, no, we were made for this moment to bring that comfort.
With a genuine sense of compassion. Yeah,
exactly.
I came across a statistic, and I don't know if this is still relevant, but I think it's still at least pertinent, but every 4 to 6 months, people go through some crisis in their life.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes it's a major crisis, sometimes it's more of a minor scale that you can immediately help out. But with thinking about that, my wife and I actually just had this conversation, and it went something like this. We need to invite our neighbors for a game night. We need to invite our neighbors and have a touch point with our neighbors again. Yeah. And it's kind of like, every time we invite them, they say no. We're kind of becoming a burden. Like the default standard answer is no. And so I've been praying through, what is the period of time that you wait before you ask them again? I know they said no.
Yeah.
But none of us can ever say, I will never do that spiritual thing that you're involved in, because at one point we were alienated from God, and we were those people that would have said, perhaps, I don't know what your testimony is, but I would never go and be with those people. I would never go to that church. I would never. Well, the Lord got a hold of our hearts, and now we can't help but be with those people and to do those things. And so we just want to allow people in a maybe non-offensive way to have access to people who pray and people who want to build community and to the glory of Christ.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about the latest thing happening. You've got this grant. Is it from Walmart? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not that successful as a musician because we're certainly not talking about music.
We'll talk about that at the end.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, I get you also have some great insights in that. So let's like bookmark that because I do want to come back to it because I've got a Christian music background. You got Christian. You're doing Christian music.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I would love to. We'll go down some fun rabbit trails with that.
That's your tease. You better hang on in this interview, and you're going to get to some incredible stuff related to
break down the Christian music industry. Is it salt and light? No.
Yes. Asking some pertinent questions. But yeah, I'm super encouraged to talk about a program that really was birthed about 4 years ago. Right around the time of COVID, there was that aspect that was going on in culture and society. And if you remember, there was a lot of social upheaval that was taking place as well. It was sort of the remanufacturing, the reimagining of culture. There was a lot of the Black Lives Matter momentum that was going on there, and a lot of people who were marching and saying, hey, we need to redress things that have taken place in the past. And certainly there's things in our culture and our society that we know are broken. We live in a fallen world, and so I don't think any Christian is going to argue about the fact that we live in a broken world. And when you look at certain things from the cycles of poverty, school to prison pipeline, your heart is just burdened by those things. And I'd be the first person to say that Black Lives Matter was not the answer. I'd say at the time, and it is not the answer. It was the culture trying to create a revolution that was going to change some of these things without the Spirit of God and without Jesus. And so you kind of knew at the onset how that was going to end up, and we've seen that to be the case even now. But about 4 years ago, we started having conversations with our city leaders. And I got involved with this thing that we formed into what was called the Justice Circle Nashville. And with that, it was a collaborative justice organization that wanted to address the areas of education, healthcare, and policing in our city of Nashville. The beautiful backdrop of our city is here. So we wanted to do work in that area and have conversations with people who were key and principal people within the context of our city. As we began to do that, we started what was called a series of listening sessions through the Act Now Commission, which you really don't need to go into a lot of this, but it's a commission that reports to the President of the United States. Then I believe it was the Biden administration. And so we were taking our findings and we were reporting those to whatever task force does something about maybe inequities and injustice within the culture in various places. And so we did listening sessions, which is bringing a group of people in and having them sit down and ask them a series of questions about their experience of the community that they're in. And so we had police that were there, we had community citizens that were there, we had college students there, we had rank and file police officers all the way up to chiefs of police that were there, we had city officials that were there in our listening sessions, and we just had a series of about 20 listening sessions where we wanted to hear from the community before we took action to figure out what it was that we needed to do. And so fast forward after 4 years and that group sort of morphing and changing in various ways, we were given the initiative that one of the places that we need to start, and I hope this is not offensive to anyone, but sometimes older people
It will be because it's YouTube.
Yeah.
People like to get offended. So
well,
don't worry.
I want that smoke then. Erskinmusic.com. Y'all know where I'm at. I ain't hard to find. But it came to our attention that older people tend to get stuck in their ways, and that if we're wanting sort of catalytic change to take place, sometimes it doesn't trickle down as well because older people have a tendency to think, this is what I believe, this is where I'm stuck, I'm not moving off of this. And so if we want to see the genesis and birth of this sort of new catalyst of education, healthcare, community wraparound services, we really do need to start with young people. And so last year we went to Boston. Some of our key leaders from that organization went to Boston, and we were at the Opportunity Youth Conference. It's really not called at-risk youth anymore, but I think that term is probably more prevalent for people who are watching this today. It was a conference all about how to address at-risk youth and how to engage them in the process of being the catalyst of change themselves. And we came back from that and we said, well, we could start something like that in our own context because we know the areas within Nashville that have some of the greatest areas of poverty and some of the greatest areas of need. And so Walmart, in conjunction with the Act Now Commission, granted us $100,000. And so we set to remanufacture and reimagine our society or our group, the Justice Circle. And we hired a director for it, Dr. Bernice Willis, who's had numerous years of police force and community activism herself. who's done a tremendous job at spearheading that program. And so we're in Casey Homes. We're in a number of different projects here around the city and doing some stuff at Stratford Middle School. And we've got about 30 kids in our program who we are taking through basic things that we would look at and say, this is pretty basic. How to hold your head high, how to think about goals, how to think about career path. We've brought in community activists and community liaisons through the Martha O'Brien Center. We've had career fairs for these kids. We've taken them on field trips to the African American Museum of History, Music Museum of History here in Nashville. We had the professional flag football team, the Misfits, come this last week over spring break and play a flag football game against the kids. And we're doing just a variety of different exercises and events for these kids. And I'm pleased to report, although we couldn't talk about church planting in this way, but I'm pleased to report that program is going tremendously well. And to see the strides that these students have made and the ownership that they're beginning to take in the program, and quite frankly, Matt, some of the difficult decisions that they have to make.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are some kids that began in the program with their friends who are not on the same trajectory in life that they are. And having to see them make decisions of, am I going to hang out with this person who has a path and trajectory right now in life that is headed one direction, and here's this opportunity over here. And so we've seen some kids make some really critical but difficult decisions in this program, and we're pleased that we can just, we may not be able to save all of them, but we believe that we can save most of them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what I think is remarkable about this is it's not a Christian program, but you're a Christian who was being salt and light in this.
Yeah. And I struggled with that because we started with a very Christian, Christ-centered focus, and we've written that into all of our mission statements. And to figure out what that means that we don't deny any of that. If we were to be asked about that, we wouldn't deny any of that. We are very Christ-centered. We meet at a church. The facilities that we have, all the information that we have that's around us is oriented to Christ and His glory. But the actual program itself, we want to be able to go into public schools and do that. And there's sort of a fine line as to how you can do that and still maintain, one, your identity in Christ, but then, working with a variety of students from various backgrounds, how you can do that faithfully and effectively.
Yeah, you have to be strategic about it and being able to get the funding to be able to do this work that is very biblical and kingdom-minded, but without being so overt that, they're like, oh, we're not going to give it, especially in this political climate where it's real easy to divide people up. And so, but the person who loses is these kids that you're serving. And so kudos to you and compliments to you. So it's like getting hot here in Nashville. It's sunny. Go ahead and put those sunglasses on. I think
let's go, baby.
Let's transition to talking about.
He ain't got cool now.
Now let's talk about Christian music.
Okay.
Because you're a musician, but you're doing the indie route. How long have you been doing that?
Can I do one other thing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Can we do a little family stuff real quick?
Yeah.
Because I've given accolades to just people all throughout the city that have done a tremendous job at helping these kids out in our Inspire program. That's what it's called, Inspire. So if you ever hear about Inspire in Nashville, that is our program through the Justice Circle, the 510 Foundation. But I want to give some accolades to my wife, who, having a husband who's a traveling Christian music artist means that I'm not at home, and that aspect of it. But that also means that as a foster family, I'm not at home to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of our foster home. And so we've been fostering now for 17 years. Wow. We adopted our kids 16 years ago. Ish. Yeah. There'll be some ishes in here because I know my daughter's on the other side of the camera doing her own work for this episode and for the Erskin Music Show. But when we got into that, our eyes were really open to the needs that are there in fostering. And man, I have seen so many stories. There are so many stories, but I pause here before we go to the Christian music part to just say that as one who has traveled a lot, I've seen my wife take the brunt of taking care of these kids and bringing them into our home. And we've had to reconfigure our home about 5 or 6 times. I mean, the basic layout of the house doesn't change, but sometimes we have bunk beds, sometimes we have loft beds, sometimes we have cots that are out there, sometimes we have air mattresses, and we want to be as hospitable as we possibly can. And so the configuration of our house changes from time to time. The walls get painted different colors. There's different things that go on. And so I just want to say kudos to my wife, Kelly, who does such a tremendous job of homemaking. homemaking.
Yeah.
Because that's a word that for some reason has fallen on disrepute in our society, and it should not.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, because one of the missions of this YouTube channel is to have stories of all walks of life. Like, it's real easy to go, let's get the biggest pop star, celebrity, movie star, athlete. Like, we all get excited when they give a shout out to Jesus on national TV, right?
If they can do it, we can do it.
Exactly. But your wife being a homemaker and serving these adoptive children is salt and light, and it's like,
yes, it is.
It is, if anything, maybe more impactful because of the relationship that she has with these children.
She's literally keeping people alive.
Exactly.
My career is quite discretionary. If you have money and you want to go to the concert, that's great. If not, then but you'll eat that day.
Keeping kids alive, but also giving them a future. A beautiful future and hope.
We hope that we propel them far, and because sometimes you don't get a chance to see the end result. And now our kids that we've adopted, we get a chance to see them on a regular basis, and they're both doing well. But these kids that sometimes will be in our home for 6 months, sometimes 2 years. It's been all different configurations of that. We had a young lady who was with us for about 4 months, and then she's transitioned to another home. And so you have all sorts of stories and all different time lengths, and we pray that at some point we are kind of propelling everybody forward. As a result of being around us. We're different.
You're planting seeds, and we won't know what the fruit of this is maybe until we get to heaven.
Sure. Amen.
So
and I'm good with that.
Kudos to your wife.
I'm good with that.
I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
The one thing going into our conversation here, I was like, how do I prepare for talking to Erskin? Because just every conversation we've had, it just kind of meanders and goes all over, which I love. It's great. So.
Well, and I'll harken back to when I first met you. You were speaking at the conference. And so I thought, man, your presentation was just so pertinent to what it means to be a follower of Christ. And I thought, I got to know this guy. I'm gonna have to stalk him a little bit. I'm gonna have to chase him down. And we ended up. It was a privilege for me to be able to have lunch with you, and then just be able to hear about all the different ways that you have touched, the Christian music industry that I've been at, but then also sharing things about your family and, being very vulnerable in that area. And so I just thought, man, we're going to be friends, and hopefully friends for a very long time, eternity also. But it was just really cool to meet you, and I'm glad to be on this podcast. I really am.
Well, let's talk Christian music real quick, because it's a passion of mine. I've worked in it for 20 years.
We're going to talk that talk, folks. Your ears are about to start burning.
Well, so this podcast is about being salt and light. And so Christian music generally is preaching to the choir, which is fine. So I guess the first question is Christian music salt and light, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I was at the African American Museum of Music History the other day, and there's this big shift that takes place, and I won't bore the audience with, following the lineage from the slave grounds of Africa to the United States of America, where slaves developed their own style of music and their own cultural forms of worship. Sometimes it was with instruments, sometimes it was without instruments, and then sparse instrumentation, and then all these different things. You start to move from Reconstruction era to like the 1920s and those sort of revivalist and yet Jim Crow segregation. There begins to be this mentality as we burst out of the Second World War that there's affluence that then takes place in America. And I was thinking about that from the standpoint of how we live in such a great nation. And I just want to go ahead and say that I'm proud to be an American, proud to be a Texan. So those flags fly side by side.
In East Nashville?
No. There's a Texas flag.
Okay.
But my wife got a little bit jealous about that, so she had to put up a Colorado flag. But we really know that when that garage door raises, you'll see the Texas flag. All right. But no, just being blessed to be in America. I've traveled around the world, and to know that affluence has afforded us the opportunity. And I don't want to run roughshod over any of the musical heritage that I've been influenced by, because the reason why we have these various forms of ragtime music, which I grew up playing jazz instrumental music. I'm named after Erskin, who was a jazz instrumental player that my grandfather met in World War II in Germany. So the fact that we have so much affluence in our society that burst out of the Second Civil War, that afforded there to be specific music venues where people could pay musicians to be there and to hone their craft. I'm a direct derivative of that. And so I want to just first of all say that the industry part of it was when people began to realize we don't necessarily need to play music. We don't need to play music for the sake of saving souls and having a shoestring budget, but we can play music to entertain people. And there's one mural in particular that was talking about the fact that we could show people that Christians who produce music are cool, or that the music is cool. Now, there might be a little bit of rub as we talk about what that mission is, to make Jesus cool. I don't know that that's necessarily what we need to be doing.
And
but
does he want that?
yeah. We're a little off course with that. But it is the mindset that, I went to see King and Country over the break and Christmas break, and phenomenal show. Their Christmas show is phenomenal. Their live show is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I've actually seen them twice this last year. They were in a city that I was touring in, and I know some of the people who were in the band. And, it's entertaining. It's engaging. They have captivated many people's attention, and you have an audience in front of you, and you can deliver the message, whatever that message is, whether it be Holt International, or whether it be World Vision or Compassion or the gospel. You have a captive audience that's there. And so I'm thankful for those sorts of things. I, perhaps like you, maybe want to wonder if that's a little off mission for what we should be. And maybe there's a space for two of them. Apparently there is, because both of them exist.
Yeah.
And so I'm good with that.
Well, because there's Christian entertainment, which is great. Like I love when my kids watch Christian entertainment, listen to Christian entertainment versus
Comedy,
the alternative.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so glad that there's an option there.
Movies.
Yeah. I think as a Christian music fan, we all get excited when, for King and Country, does a duet with Tori Kelly. Or, right now the buzz is Jelly Roll with Brandon Lake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I actually had this conversation yesterday when we were talking about, like, Jelly Roll is exposing so many people right now to the gospel.
Uh-oh. Yeah, here we go.
And he also has a lot of stuff in his life. He's, as the church, I'll say the church, a lot of Christians be like, how dare you? How dare he? He's not a Christian. He does this still. He says this. Have you heard his language? And yet, I guess I'm starting to realize, like, Salt and Light looks so different, and God uses all kinds of different people.
Sure.
And so I think that as in the image of God, we love creativity and we love the arts. And so I do think that when Christians are able to create art, lyric or sound, that compels us it draws us closer to God. And so I do think it's Salt and Light. I think, Salt and Light to people who maybe don't know Jesus yet, and Salt and Light to us believers just becoming more salty. I mean, this is a Christian podcast on a Christian YouTube right now, right?
Yeah.
And so hopefully it is inspiring people to be more salty. So I guess I'm kind of drawing a parallel to Christian music. It hopefully makes us become more salt and light.
Yeah, the thing about that is most people don't have a brain. And I'm not saying that you're stupid. I just kind of said you're stupid. Most people don't think for themselves.
Yeah.
And I'll say that even in my own camp. I tend to be more theologically reformed and more on that spectrum of things. But I hear some reformed people say some of the dumbest stuff. And I'm like, this is my camp. These literally are my people that I would lock arms with. Theologically, I would go to war with. I would go to battle with. I would die for these people who are saying these kind of things. And then they'll turn around and they'll say some of the dumbest stuff. Well, and I say, I don't mean to offend anybody out there, but I hope I offend the right kind of people that are out there who are not thinking critically about the fact that we need to understand what people's limitations are. I'm not going to Jelly Roll and asking him to be R.C. Sproul.
Yes.
I'm not asking him to be a theologian.
Yeah.
What he's sharing from his platform and from his perspective is something that he has lived out in his experience. Russell Brand, same way.
Exactly. Yeah.
New Christian convert, maybe wouldn't platform him as much as some people, but yet and still, from the overflow of his heart, the mouth speaks. And the things that he's saying is exposing a lot of what, the Pharisaicalism that is found in Christianity these days. And so, although I don't need Russell Brand to be Albert Mohler, he's not going to brief me every day on what's going on in politics and culture and life. He's just not that guy. But he can speak from his vantage point and reference point that he has and touch the people in whom God has ordained for him to touch. And I'm actually good with that. Whereas I know friends would be like, Bethel, elevation. And look, I got some problems with some Bethel and some elevation. I'll be the first person to say, look, there's some nonsense that's going on out there. But at the same time, there's a sphere of influence and some people that they're reaching that I might meet them and be like, okay, let's go to the next level. Now let's actually open the Bible and see what it actually says.
Yeah. I had this conversation with my wife, and I mean, I've been having this conversation a lot since starting this YouTube channel, but I think over the past year or two, there's been a lot of celebrity Christians. You know, you mentioned Russell Brand. There's just been a lot more happening. There's a guy, I'm blanking on his name, but he used to work with the Paul guy, the Justin Paul brothers. Anyway.
Janko?
Janko.
Yeah,
George
Janko, yeah.
So there's a lot of these in the public eye and culture who are proclaiming the name of Jesus, which is amazing. But I think it makes it all the more reason that all Christians need to be salt and light, because I may be seeing George Janko or Russell Brand and go, oh, he's a Christian, and curious, or the parade of Christians who've gone on the Joe Rogan podcast over the past couple of years.
Yeah, Wes Huff did a fantastic job.
Yeah, so you've got all these, but like, we need relationship. And we're not going to get that relationship with Russell Brand or the latest Joe Rogan podcast guest who's a Christian. Like, they're kind of the introductory. They're like the Costco sample, maybe. Like,
sure.
Get you like, I'm a little curious now. I keep on hearing Jesus come up in the pop culture vernacular. But now we need some real Christians in your community, in your neighborhood, to be able to connect with. And that's where the discipleship happens. That's where people are able to actually go, what does this Christian life look like?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great discussion. And, you know, I dig just a little bit because I like to be just a tad bit.
You're trying to give me those good highlight clips for on YouTube, you know, social media.
This be all the blackmail, but, you know, if you know anything about Erskin music, you know he wants that smoke. No, but I poked the bear just a little bit in Christianity because, listen, as somebody who's planting a church, I am not against the church. I know the church is God's plan A and there's no plan B. And so that is where the locus of activity needs to take place, because salvation, discipleship, mission, prayer, praise, and proclamation, that's the locus place of all of that. But as we fan out into society, like you're talking about being salt and light, I don't know that we've always done a good job of recognizing what that looks like. And I say we've done a poor job of recognizing what that looks like, because you'll pay $20, $50, $100 to go see somebody do Christian entertainment. And you'll say in your churches, man, we value the gospel. We need to get out and be salt and light. We need to preach the gospel to the ends of the earth. But when it comes to independent artists, sometimes like myself and other independent artists that I know, I mean, you want $50 to come in? You want $100 to come here and sing? I mean, we'll have to see. We'll have to go into committee and have 6 different meetings before we can decide if we need to give you some gas money to do what it is that you're doing. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why was one of those things valued? There was going to be less than what it was that you said that you valued, but then you didn't value that monetarily, because Jesus said where your money is, that's where your heart is. Yeah. And so I'm just reaching in and grabbing people's hearts out in this podcast.
Well, I mean, you went to the money side of things.
Money.
But like paying to go to worship.
Hey, can we get some water up in this thing? Can you go find some water? Talk to the people that are out there.
I should have come prepared with a water bottle, but you know you're like guest number 4. So
I thought about that. You can edit this out, but yeah.
Oh no, we're gonna keep it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine.
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, we're going more Christian culture now. We're talking Christian culture, but
don't leave the music part of that though.
Yeah.
Because I do think that there's an important part about the kind of music that is produced and the way that it's produced. And as somebody that writes pop, country, hip hop, R&B, ballad, soul, children's music, and EDM, I think there's something about the way that music is produced, the message in the music, and so don't completely leave behind the music part of it, even though you want to talk about culture.
I'm not leaving music part. I'm going to go with, so at this podcast conference we went to, there was a guy named Adam Curry there, co-creator of podcasting, and I've had some great conversations with him, and one of the things that he is really, so he became a Christian about 2 years ago. And one of the initiatives he's working on, he calls it value for value. And so when you get value for something, you return value. And so he's talking in the digital economy, you know, on a YouTube channel, on a podcast, music. Which I 100% agree. Like, if you're providing value, you're encouraging someone in their faith, like, yeah, you should give what that's worth to you. So you're talking about like, how much is it worth to someone? Yeah. And then I think about like a Rich Mullins, who would tour around the country back in the 70s or 80s, and didn't want to charge for people to come. He took a love offering, but it was like, you know what, the gospel's free. So anyone who wants to come to my concert can. And I wasn't even born yet, but I don't know what it exactly looked like. But that model I think is refreshing to a lot
Sure.
because it's like, yeah, it's open for everybody. And so,
Yeah.
but there's practical, like for you to be able to go to a city and do it, it costs money. Like, so we're not expecting you to do it for free. Like no one should.
Yeah.
Like, and you've got to feed your babies.
Yeah. So let me just talk about that in reference to scalability. Scalability. Yep. Rich Mullins is going to all of these cities now. Keep that in mind. He's going to all these cities. And I don't know Rich Mullins. Rich Mullins people, if y'all want to get on here and contradict me, that's fine. Rich Mullins is going to all these different cities.
So he's an oldie. He passed away.
Yeah, I mean, he went to all these cities. Yes, I know the historical lineage of Rich Mullins. But went to all these cities, and he was able to take up a love offering. Well, I'm not going to all these cities like he was going. And so the scalability of what it is that I'm doing is much smaller, which means that there's a smaller sample size. I would say that people are probably as generous or more generous than they were back in his day, but since it's a smaller sample size, it's harder to do those kind of things, and it's harder to have that kind of momentum.
Yeah.
If I was, I mean, literally, there's a couple places that if I just went there in Texas, I would make a nice living.
Yeah.
But I got to go to places like up in the north. I'm getting ready to head out to Utah. I mean, the financial prospects are not as good in those places because you don't have as many Christians who are there. But yet those are exactly the places where we need to be going. And so I want to get out to California. I want to get out to Seattle. They're going to love the music, but I'm also bringing the message with the music as well. And so that's the part where I wanted to make sure that we don't disconnect this from the musical part of what's going on there, because the very fact that we can go places, the very fact that there are places that are out there to go, necessitates that we take a certain message with us when we go there, and not just be entertainment.
Yeah, and there's a quote.
Clowns.
I'm going to butcher it, but it is basically, when words fail, music speaks. So coming back to salt.
You didn't butcher very much on that statement.
No, do you know where the quote comes from? Who did that quote?
I don't know.
I
thought you just made that up.
No, I didn't. My wife bought a pillow from like Hobby Lobby, and it says that.
Oh,
but
okay.
it's like a beautiful quote, and it's so true. And so when we talk,
I was going to say Matt, quoted by Matt Munt.
Matt Munt, yeah. Actually, I think I heard about it first from Switchfoot, Jon Foreman of Switchfoot, I believe. Which he's a poet, a songwriter.
He is.
And so yeah, when you bring it back to Salt and Light, like, what better way to get the message of Jesus, Salt and Light, out there, but through the form of song and art, because it will cut through. It does have that's why Christian films, have been, people will give towards that, because it's like some people may not step foot in the church, but they'll walk into the movie theater, and if they can get the message of hope, the message of Jesus in a film,
absolutely,
it's great.
Absolutely, and just even seeing it on the marquee and seeing some of the promotions that are related to it causes people to look at that and think, what's out there? What's going on here?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. Is Jon Foreman been on this show before?
Not yet. Jon Foreman, you're next.
You're next, Jon Foreman. You're about to get served here for just a second here, because one of the books that he had that just recently came out, he was I think he was speaking from his experience of sort of the duplicity of the Christian music industry, and he's certainly seen a lot more than I have in terms of kind of where artists are at in relationship to the actual message and the audience and the things that are there. And so he has every right to speak on that, I would say. They're a tremendous group, and if anybody doubts the validity and the success and the stick-to-itiveness, resilience, just look at the tenure of their ministry and what it is they've been able to do. But I would say, there was one time I was listening to Jon Foreman, and he was talking about artists and the nature of artists, and I was thinking, he might be talking about the artists that are in the Christian music industry, because there's virtually no artist that I know that's an independent artist that has those tendencies. And so I say that just simply to say that from the sample size that I have, most of the artists that I know would come and do free shows. They would do things because the Lord has compelled them to do it, not because of the financial gain that's on the other side. I just wanted to open your audience up to the financial realities that sometimes people forget about. They get amnesia all of a sudden when it's like, oh, well, we don't understand what you do. Well, what do you mean you don't understand what it is that I do? I have songs, music, I'm talking about Jesus. You understood it when you were at the concert. Now you don't understand what it is when I'm trying to come to you. And so that is primarily a booking thing, because all the places that I've been that have actually booked me, they've taken good care of me. And so it's just hard to get in the door, because as you well know, churches have a way that they do things. This is not the way that they do things. And so you have to challenge and push against some of those norms in order to be salt and light. And I hasten to say all of these words because somebody might misunderstand what it is that I'm saying. When I'm playing shows at the church, and what I'm talking about being salt and light is not preaching to the choir. There are lost people within the context of the church.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm very good friends with a lot of pastors, and sometimes the membership in churches is generate. Sometimes they're regenerate. In a lot of cases, make sure this man has some water as well. Thank you very much. But there
Thank you.
are lots of non-believers in churches as well, because discipleship has fallen on such hard times.
Amen. Well, any last thoughts? I mean, like you said, you're a theologian.
We're at the end of this already?
I mean, where else do you want to go?
Oh, I mean, yeah.
So the one thing, you're a theologian, you got a seminary degree. Break down salt and light.
Everybody's a theologian, says R.C. Sproul, and he's absolutely right, because what concept comes to our mind when we hear the name Jesus dictates what our theology is. So was Jesus a moral revolutionary, as certain people have painted him to be in this sort of social gospel? Was Jesus the empathetic savior who would bend at the will of every person that he saw, and even sacrifice the will of the Father so that he could empathize with people that were out there? And I'm not trying to make empathy a sin. I'm just saying that that's a popular discussion that people are having right now. Is the fact that I feel bad about people who are immigrants who come into our country illegally, does that mean that we need to then circumvent the law? So you get into some of those conversations. Who was Jesus? And so all of us will answer that question in a particular way. Some people say Jesus was a fairy tale. That says something about your theology. You're an arrogant, prideful prig that is idolatrous because you don't believe there's anything in Jesus that you need to observe, because you want to observe what it is that you want to observe. And so you're a selfish coward. But is Jesus the Son of God who was God? Well, the Mormons won't say that. Jehovah's Witnesses won't say that. They're going to veer from that. Our theological degree should be nothing more than us just reciting and understanding that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh, John 1:14, and we beheld his glory. Glory is the only begotten, full of grace and truth. And so that theology should dictate what it is that we do. I was having a conversation with somebody, and I wanted to at least get this into this podcast. There was another artist, and I was listening to a mix that they had. Sometimes other artists will send me mixes, and they will say, well, what do you think about it before we take it to mastering and before we release to the public? And I gave a little bit of a critique, and I said, I can't really understand the words. And they said, well, that's kind of the vibe of the music. And I was like, well, Christian music needs to be a little bit more distinct than that, because if people can't understand the words that you're saying, well, it's like Paul talked about in Corinthians, if the trumpet doesn't sound a clear tone, we won't know what action that we need to respond to. And so too, the lyrics in Christian music, and we at least try to, in our music, Erskin music, push the vocals to the front so people can understand what's being said, what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. If I'm going to get in trouble for what it is that I'm saying, then let me get in trouble for what it is that I'm saying, not get in trouble for what I'm not saying.
Make sure it's clear.
Yeah, what you thought I was saying, or what I should have been more articulate to say. And so I just wanted to make sure that I got that in. I don't think that I have anything else that I need to say.
No, that's really good. I mean, it's a great way to end the conversation on Christian music, because Christian music is a genre based on lyrical content. You know, I mean, you rattle off all the different styles you make.
Pop, country, hip hop, R&B, ballad, soul, children's music, and EDM.
And it's all Christian?
Yes.
And it's all with clear lyrics that are biblically.
They're all clear lyrics.
Yeah.
I don't always just come out every single song just Jesus, Jesus, Jesus,
Yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
Jesus, 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 Jesus. But every song is going to have that as an undertone. It's going to be a current. There's a theme that I have that's called Wanderer. And the refrain of it is, and I don't mind doing this, the refrain of it says, now I'm in love. And it sounds like a soulful, kind of romantic song. Blues, soul kind of put together. And people think that it's a love song. But what the song is about, if you listen to the lyrics and you listen to the words, it's about the relationship that one has with the church. Being sort of that outsider that's looking at the church and saying, well, I can love Jesus, but I don't have to love the church and God's people. From being transitioned from that point to saying, you know what? I need the church in my life.
Yeah.
And so now I'm in love with the church. So now I'm in love with the message of the church, the mission of the church, the people of the church who are the church. And that all begins to galvanize into this beautiful life that is lived to the glory of God. And so that's kind of a fun way that music and artists can imagine the world and imagine vocalizing musically something that would be of clear theological benefit.
Nice. All right, well, final words, encouragement to the people watching. What's your encouragement for them to be salt and light? Maybe they're on the fence. Or how do they be more salt and light? Like, I believe that there's scales of our saltiness, maybe. And God always wants us to go deeper with him. And then when we're more humble and more open to him, he's going to use us more. He wants to use us as part of his plan.
Yeah, my final word, folks, is salty people. Y'all need to stay hydrated. Y'all need to get y'all's own water and drink lots of water and stay hydrated. But I was listening to this conversation, Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort, Way of the Master type stuff that they were doing, and used some of that from my own Erskin music show. And they were talking about being authentic. And I think that's the thing that is so puzzling to me. Because sometimes people will meet me and they will have the opposite reaction than what you had. He's not humble. He's very loud and he's aggressive about certain things. Yeah. But I'm like this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then wrap around and let's repeat. That's just who I am. And once people realize that, they start to settle into the fact that, oh, he's just like this. And there's an authenticity that they'll let me get away with saying certain things like, you're a coward, or you're an idolatrous prig. That other people that they might not sense that was a genuine, you said that because Erskin said that, or you were talking like that because Ray Comfort was talking like that, and you think that you're somebody, and it doesn't come across as authentic. And so just where you're at, just be authentic. I want to wrap this around and just say kudos to the real superhero of our family, which is my wife. She does not at all have my personality. Not at all. And it's a beautiful thing for me to watch her in her own element, sometimes reserved. Sometimes she'll wait until the very end before she says something, but she will have thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and what she says is just really good. Whereas if I almost have thought about it, it's ready, shoot, aim in most cases. And so I do appreciate all the different varieties of ways that God has made us salt and light. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing for the kingdom of God, to recognize that we're not dysfunctional because we're different, but we are the salt and light that God has made us to be in the places where God has put us. For that reason, he's ordained it. And so God bless you guys. Thanks for watching this.
Yeah, thanks. Where can people find out about your music?
ErskinMusic.com. All right. Or they can get on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, Rumble, and all the different nonsense out there social media-wise, and watch me live Tuesday through Thursday on my live stream show called the Erskin Music Show. Okay. I will definitely be talking trash on that show, and glad of it, because I'm able to raise awareness to things like genocide that's taking place in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo. Genocide that's taking place among Syrians, the Alawite community right now.
So what is your show in a nutshell?
It's life, culture, and art. Let's talk about it. Life, culture, and art. Let's talk about it. And so during the pandemic, I started the show because we couldn't go out and do live shows that particular time. And I thought, this is a fun way to engage with various audiences in places where I've been. And so you can literally look at my metrics for the show, and places where I've started touring, there's people who have started watching. And so every place that I go in different parts of the country and the world, there's more and more people who start watching the show. And that's a beautiful thing, to watch how your direct presence becomes salt and light in people's lives. And they begin to say, well, what else does he have to say? What else, do we continue this conversation and this relationship by? And that's been very rewarding, at least for me. Hopefully I'm not annoying you guys out there, but
and
content creators.
When you're creating content that's based on truth, that's salt and light, and you're putting it out there on all these different channels, and there's also an element we don't know who it's going to reach. Like, you're talking about the people that you do reach in your shows, but I mean, when I launched this YouTube channel, like the first weekend I posted a YouTube short, and it was about a guy named Dean. He's 80 years old, and he works at a pharmacy, and he prays for people to be healed. And that thing went out to 600 people in the first hour. And I was like, and I just launched this YouTube channel. I was like, all right, God, like, that's amazing. I didn't post it to my social media and tell anybody. That was just YouTube, pushing it out there. And so, like, content as salt and light is a passion of mine. Yeah, and absolutely. So I love that you're doing that. I think there needs to be more Christian content creators. I think there's also, you don't have to be a, quote, Christian content creator. You can be a creator who also weaves in your faith. There's a guy lives here in Middle Tennessee. He's got a YouTube channel called Bikes and Beards. And he just does these super fun videos working on bikes, doing the, he's kind of, I don't want to compare him to Mr. Beast, but like fun, audacious, random stuff. But all around, he's got a big old beard and he does these cool bikes, motorcycles. But and most of his episodes, he'll just weave in, I was reading in Proverbs the other day. Like, again, he's not a Christian YouTuber, but he's just dropping little stuff, not being annoying, and like, that's Salt and Light also.
Sure.
And so it's beautiful. I love
there's
it.
people who do that with their furniture channel and restoration and all sorts of stuff, a DIY wife and those kind of things. And so, it's beautiful. I love what it is you're doing. I love this platform. And keep it up, bro.
Awesome. Thanks, man.